Hi, my name's Max Baden, and I'm a consuming culture student at Curtin University. Today, we're going to be talking on this podcast about consuming culture and what consumption means to me. So, to me, consumption is all around us. It kind of always has been, but recently it's really on its insurgence. You know, I wake up and I check my phone. I might go on Twitter or Instagram. Later in the day, I might check my emails while at uni or at work. Later that night, I might watch the news, or throughout the day I listen to some music. In my life as a university student, consumption in the masses is a constant. Richens describes consumer goals as staying alive, fitting in, being me, feeling good, and hoping and dreaming. And whilst in 2005, when the paper was written, and up until now, these are all very true, with the immersion of new technologies, our consumption habits as a society have evolved and changed over time. To me, consumption used to only be something where there was an exchange of information, or I learnt something. Ask me 3 years ago what I consumed in a day, and I'd tell you my lunch, breakfast, and dinner, and what my teacher taught me at school. But consumption is so much more than that. And today, we have just so much to consume. Looking at the question, how do you see the role of consumption in structuring your day-to-day life? I believe that we live in a world, in a generation, and at a time where consumption has a large amount of persuasion of the structure of our lives. From our constant need to have our mobile phone attached to us at all times, or the constant feed of news and information coming in through a number of platforms, consumption in one way or another rules the lives of many young people in the Western world. There's an article written by Mike Featherstone in 1982, which explores consumer culture and takes a deeper look into the evolution of mass consumption in a contemporary society. This article looks into the gradual increase in mass production and how mass production brings along its necessary evil, mass consumption. Featherstone continues to explore how consumer culture has shaped the evolution of society itself, especially when it comes to the external image of the youth. I believe that Featherstone, whilst using dated technological examples, accurately displays how we as a modern society have let consumption structure our lives. And let's be honest, this structure isn't always on a big scale. Sometimes it's having the TV playing in the background whilst you're having dinner. Whilst a small and seemingly insignificant act, it is a means of consumption while we go around our day-to-day lives. And we can really use this to see how consumption has started to play a role in the structure of our lives. Another way, a scholarly article I've read, which has opened my eyes to how I consume life and culture, is Slater's 1997 paper, The Meaning of Things. Whilst I had always felt like my consumption habits in one way or another shaped who I was as an individual, it wasn't until I read The Meaning of Things until I felt like I could really make that connection. Slater explores the meaning of consumerism and how it relates to modern society. Slater continues to expose the contemporary meaning for the term need and want, and how they relate to consumption in a modern society. Described as a meaningful activity, Slater displays how we as humans are unique in our consumption habits, as we are the only species to consume in the masses outside of our basic physiological and psychological needs. Our consumption of food is a prime example of this, as we no longer eat purely for sustenance, and are often quite picky with the foods we digest. The things you consume, and when, where, and how you do so, are what make people individual. Now, with another question on mind, how does the academic study of consumption help you understand the role of consumption in your life? Well, whilst not an activity that I partook in previously to reading academic articles on the subject, I now find myself examining my consumption habits on a deeper level much more often. There was an article written in 2006 by Gabrielle and Lang, which explores the concept of the consumer, and how the consumer is perceived through the lens of an entity creating something to be distributed. This concept is encapsulated in the opening term of their paper, stating that the consumer is a godlike figure. The paper continues to exclaim that, whilst the consumer is at the basis of all products, they are also seen as weak and malleable creatures, easily manipulated, dependent, passive, and foolish. This paper explores the many personas or faces of which the consumer can take, from the consumer as a chooser all the way to the consumer as a rebel or even just a citizen. This article holds a large amount of significance for the study of consumption and consumerism. Gabrielle and Lang have concisely broken down the different forms that consumers can take on. Some of these include the consumer as a chooser, a communicator, an explorer, an identity seeker, and a victim. Originally written in the 90s, The Unimaginable Consumer argued the thesis that the consumer was an intellectually unstable entity and explored the treatment of the consumer as controllable or free. This article continued to explore the notion that no matter how much the consumer is coaxed into making a certain decision, they will forever be unpredictable and unmanageable. I resonate with this article as it helps me understand the role of consumption in my life. Whilst I believe that no individual's consumption habits can be clearly defined, Gabrielle and Lang's article most certainly helped with my understanding of both the subject itself and how it directly relates to my life. Another article which I felt was interesting in the study of modern consumption is Stefano Pacini's paper, A Binge Consuming Culture: The Effect of Consumerism on Social Interactions in Western Societies. Released in 2013, Pacini explores how we live in a binge-consuming world. Indeed, a certain compulsion to consume seems to characterize not only the way in which people relate to the object world of luxury goods, but also the way we relate to other people, institutions, and society in general. In this sense, the term binge, usually associated with addictions, may be also useful in identifying our consuming culture. These articles and the study of their material has allowed me to understand and appreciate the role of consumption in my life. It was unbeknownst to me previous to reading some of these articles of how much I really consume, especially digital media. Whilst retrospectively this might seem a little silly, for lack of a better word, as now with a better understanding of the term, I'm aware of how broad consumption is. And the study of these articles really led me to this discovery. I believe that consumption affects all of us, whether we are born into wealth or poverty, to the northern or southern hemisphere. We as human beings are geared in such a way that we've become a consumer culture. Many choices made in a day are driven by consumption needs and desires. Whether or not what we obtain is a genuine need, both advertisements and just how the world has been structured in the 21st century has pushed the entirety of humanity into this consumer culture.